In the spring of 1888, a balmy March day rapidly turned into a weather event for the ages. As a cold front from Canada collided with a front of air from the Gulf, the mild weather enjoyed across Delaware and the East Coast quickly dipped. The winds picked up and rain soon turned to snow. The days that followed would be known as the Great White Hurricane, a storm that lasted nearly 3 days, winds howling more than 40 miles per hour, dropping over 50 inches of snow in some locations across the Northeast, and ultimately claiming nearly 400 lives during its entirety. Some of the most unforgettable moments from the storm came right off the docks in Lewis Beach, where nearly 50 ships fled into the harbor to seek refuge behind Lewis's large stone breakwater. Despite being known as one of the safest locations for vessels to weather through storms along the eastern seaboard, Lewis's harbor would become a scene of massive destruction, but also of heroic rescues that would be known across the nation. As the storm ramped up and temperatures dropped, the ocean spray turned to ice with everything it met, including ships' riggings, decks, and hulls, and soon large stretches of the bay and ocean waters froze over, trapping the already ice-covered ships. Reports in the days that followed claimed multiple lives had been lost and dozens of ships grounded and destroyed. Just one of the ships to run into disaster was the tugboat George Simpson. The tugboat's captain, Andrew Holt, explained the helplessness amidst the storm. Quote, "It was the worst storm I ever witnessed. We were running down the bay in a heavy rain when all of a sudden the wind changed to the north and began blowing a galer. Then it started to snow, and oh, how did it snow? We were simply at the mercy of the storm. I couldn't see the flagstaff on the bow of the boat. Thinking the best thing I could do would be to run into Lewis, I headed in that direction. I hadn't the slightest idea of where I was when I crashed into the iron pier. 2 of the men jumped off to make the boat fast to the pier, but before we could throw lines, we had been carried away by the storm and were in a fair way of going to the bottom at any minute." End quote. Fortunately, minutes later, another tugboat, the Protector, came to the rescue after hearing distress whistles from Holt's ship. Holt was the last one off his tugboat, dangerously leaping from his sinking ship to the deck of the Protector and gashing his head in the process. Despite this injury, he and his crew were lucky enough to all survive. Back on shore, the life-saving stations in Lewis and Rehoboth Beach were constantly called to action and fought treacherous conditions to aid crews stuck on ships covered in ice and foundering offshore. Some of these missions called for the life-saving crews to crawl across large swaths of ice, hauling their equipment with them, just to avoid the deadly conditions themselves. The brave crews saved dozens of lives during the storm, and their deeds are well remembered to this day. Meanwhile, inland towns saw record-setting snowfall. Milford and Wilmington were coated in so much snow, everyday functions completely shut down. Even major cities up the coast such as Philadelphia and New York fared no better, seeing their transportation, communication, and even emergency infrastructures all knocked out during the height of the storm. The Great White Hurricane of 1888 was a storm that has never quite been forgotten along the East Coast, and especially here in Lewis, and always serves to remind us that no matter how nice the days in March may get, we should never assume Mother Nature isn't holding back one more blast of winter.
Museum Minutes is brought to you by the Swannendale Museum in Lewis, Delaware, and by the Delaware Division of Historical and Cultural Affairs.